The room fell into a tense silence as Clarence Thomas leaned forward, his deep voice echoing across the chamber like the final word of a judge who believed he'd already won. Cameras rolled, microphones caught every breath, and the entire nation seemed to lean closer to their screens. Across from him sat Jasmine Crockett, her expression unreadable but her eyes burning with quiet defiance. What began as a routine hearing was about to erupt into one of the most unforgettable confrontations in political history, a moment that would define careers, expose power and test courage. For weeks, tensions had been brewing between the two. Clarence Thomas, a figure known for his stoic silence and unshakable conservatism, had made subtle remarks in previous sessions that many called dismissive, especially toward younger members of Congress like Crockett. Jasmine, a rising star with a sharp mind and sharper tongue, had built her name on standing up for those without power. When she entered that hearing room, she wasn't there to start a fight, but she wasn't about to bow to one either. The exchange began innocently enough. A question about judicial ethics, a polite response. But as the back and forth continued, the tone shifted. Thomas leaned in, his words coated with condescension as he questioned Jasmine's experience and understanding of real governance. The comment drew quiet gasps. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. His tone dripped with the same dismissive arrogance that had silenced so many voices before hers. Yet Jasmine didn't flinch. She straightened her papers, took a calm breath, and prepared to strike, not with anger but precision. "I understand more than you think," Jasmine began, her voice steady but firm. "And perhaps that's what you fear." Her words cut through the heavy air like lightning. The room stirred. Reporters glanced up from their laptops. Thomas smirked, underestimating her again. But Jasmine was just getting started. She spoke not just to him, but to every person watching, the students, the mothers, the workers who'd been told they weren't enough, who'd been dismissed because of their gender, their color, or their youth. In that moment, she wasn't merely defending herself. She was channeling generations of silenced voices. "Respect isn't given because of age or title," she continued. "It's earned through integrity. And integrity doesn't hide behind robes or rulings. It stands in front of the truth." The words landed like thunder. Even Thomas's expression faltered for a moment. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of reaction, every bead of tension forming between two worlds, colliding under the weight of history. As the hearing pressed on, Thomas tried to regain control. He shifted tactics. Calm, dismissive tones replaced the direct attack. But Jasmine saw through it. She had spent her career studying the power dynamics that kept people like her quiet. Every attempt to belittle her only fueled her determination. The crowd watching online began to rally. Hashtags formed within minutes. The Crockett vs. Thomas trended globally. What started as a political hearing was turning into a symbol of defiance against condescension, disguised as authority. Behind her confidence, though, Jasmine fought a storm. She knew the risks. Speaking out against someone like Clarence Thomas wasn't just about words. It was about reputation, backlash, and political survival. She had seen others destroyed for less. But as she looked around that room, she saw something stronger than fear. She saw belief. Belief in the idea that power should never go unchecked. Belief that truth, once spoken boldly, could echo far beyond walls of marble and wood. Then came the turning point. Thomas attempted to end the exchange with a mocking laugh, dismissing her as another loud voice with little understanding. That was his mistake. Jasmine leaned forward, her eyes steady, her voice low but carrying. "You've spent decades on that bench," she said softly, "but you still don't understand that silence doesn't mean ignorance, and volume doesn't mean arrogance. It means someone finally stopped being afraid." The chamber froze. Even those who had opposed her ideology couldn't help but respect the conviction in her tone. For a long, heavy second, Thomas said nothing. His hand tightened around his pen, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence spoke louder than any rebuttal. Jasmine sat back, composed, knowing she had done something few dared. She had stood toe-to-toe with a symbol of unshakable power and refused to bow. Outside, the media erupted. Commentators called it a generational reckoning. Supporters flooded her office with messages of solidarity. Even her critics had to admit she had held her ground. As the days passed, the clip spread like wildfire. It wasn't just politics, it was personal. Millions shared it not because they cared about committee hearings, but because they saw themselves in her. They saw the moments when they'd been talked down to, underestimated or humiliated, and wished they'd had the courage to fight back. Jasmine's confrontation became a mirror of collective resistance, a reminder that dignity can't be taken, only surrendered. And she refused to surrender, but victory came with consequences. Online attacks followed. Commentators twisted her words. Headlines exaggerated her tone. Yet through the noise, Jasmine stayed composed. "Let them talk," she told her staff. "If they're talking, it means they're listening. And if they're listening, it means something's changing." She knew the storm would pass, but the impact of that moment would last. It had shifted something deep in the country's conscience. Weeks later, when the dust settled, Jasmine was invited to speak at a university. Standing before hundreds of students, she looked out at faces full of hope and fear, ambition and uncertainty, the same mix she once carried. "Don't let anyone tell you your place," she told them. "Because the moment they do, they've already lost theirs." The room erupted in applause, tears and pride. For many, her words weren't just inspiration, they were validation. Meanwhile, Clarence Thomas avoided further comment on the exchange. His usual confidence seemed thinner in public appearances. Analysts debated what it meant, whether it was a symbolic shift in power or simply a generational clash. But for those who'd watched it unfold, the meaning was clear. It wasn't about right or left, young or old. It was about truth, standing its ground in the face of arrogance. Jasmine's story rippled across communities. People began sharing their own moments of standing up to authority, in classrooms, in workplaces, in families. She became an icon not for perfection, but for courage. Her words reminded people that fighting back doesn't always mean shouting louder. It means speaking clearer, standing taller, and believing that even the smallest voice can shake the foundations of power. Months later, when she was asked in an interview if she regretted how bold she had been, Jasmine smiled softly. "I didn't hit back to humiliate him," she said. "I hit back to remind him and everyone watching that respect isn't granted by title. It's earned by truth." That line went viral again, reigniting the moment with even greater force. By the year's end, the confrontation had become more than a political flashpoint. It was a cultural moment, replayed in classrooms, analyzed in podcasts, and etched into modern history as an emblem of fearless accountability. Jasmine Crockett had walked into that chamber as a representative, but she walked out as a symbol of resistance, a symbol of belief, a symbol of the simple, powerful truth that no voice, no matter how small, is ever truly powerless when it speaks with conviction. And as the lights dimmed after her final public appearance that year, Jasmine took one last look at the crowd, smiled through the exhaustion and whispered to herself, "That's how change begins." It wasn't the noise or the headlines that mattered, it was the quiet ripple of courage moving through hearts she would never meet. That ripple, she knew, was unstoppable. Clarence Thomas had tried to humiliate her that day, but in doing so, he unknowingly became part of her legacy. His condescension became the catalyst for her rise, his dismissal the spark for her defiance. The story wasn't about vengeance, it was about victory, the kind that comes not from shouting someone down, but from standing tall when the world expects you to kneel. In the end, Jasmine didn't just hit back hard, she hit back right. Her response didn't just silence a room, it awakened one. And in that awakening, she proved something timeless, that when courage meets conviction, even the most powerful can be humbled, and even the smallest voice can echo through history.